Hello there, everybody. How are we doing? Merry Monday once again. Right, guys, we're gonna start off the week by watching Mr. Ballen. I haven't watched a few of his videos for far too long, and I miss them. I miss being absolutely scared, freaked out of my mind. Because there's something wrong with my brain, I think. But I know many of you out there agree with me. There's just something very, I don't know, kind of like addictive about ghost stories. It's like deep down we like frightening ourselves, you know, that feeling that you get when you wake up in the middle of the night, you have to go to the bathroom and you have scared yourself stupid. So all of those thoughts, like every shadow, every creak, every noise, it reminds you of whatever horror film or ghost story in this case you unfortunately watched or listened to before you went to sleep. So a lot of these stories from Mr. Ballen have, I wouldn't say given me nightmares, but they've, oh gosh, some of them I've got goosebumps as he's telling, you know, when he gets to the end of the story. And yes, they do freak me out an awful lot. And the imagery that he uses is it's fantastic. And he's just such a good storyteller. But I am told I'm very immersive. So I get very immersed in the story. So speaking of the imagery, I'm sure you guys have noticed the thumbnail that's been used here. I want to say that's what attracted me to this story. That's definitely the wrong choice of words there. So that gory image, because like I said, there's something wrong with me. I like horror films. I love horror films even. I like being scared out of my mind. And this image, these photos that Mr. Ballen is going to use in these videos today are terrifying. And yeah, that is what kind of what drew me to this video, I suppose. That's a weird thing to say, but it looks terrifying. So the scarier the better. So done an awful lot of talking already, guys. Let's just get on with the video. And as ever, my lovelies, if you are enjoying these reactions, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. And I thank you in advance, guys. It's so helpful for my channel. Honestly, thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you're interested, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account. And that link is over here. Okay, I know you've seen the thumbnail, so you know what I'm talking about, guys. But it's already freaking me out already.
Today, I'm going to share 3 progressively more disturbing stories, and at the end of each of them, I'm going to share the photo that is famously associated with them. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload 2 or 3 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please become a surgeon at the hospital located closest to where the like button lives, and then eventually, when the like button goes in for very minor outpatient surgery, accidentally perform a craniectomy on them. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right?
You know, I just had a thought, guys. I love every episode, every video is different. The little things he says about the like button, they do tickle me. So many of these stories I've never heard before. Even the handful of them that I've heard that take place or did take place in England or the UK, I've never heard of those stories. So for our viewers from the US, these stories that Mr. Ballen talks about, have you heard them before? Are they kind of, are they ghost stories that everyone, especially if it happened quite close to you, is it something that everyone is aware of? Or, you know, obviously if they've happened more recently, as some of them have, maybe they made the news. Yeah, or is it most of these stories are new, just as new to you guys as they are to me?
Let's get into today's stories.
I love his tie. And the checkered shirt. It wouldn't be a Mr. Ballen without the checkered shirt and the spectacle.
Just after midnight on June 17th, 1939, a crowd of people began to form outside of this unremarkable building in Versailles, which is a city in France. The atmosphere in this crowd was...
Versailles? Was that the Eiffel Tower in the background?
electric. They all knew why they were there. They knew what they were about to see, but even still, there was a lot of nervous anticipation. And so as such, some people were coping with these nerves by drinking alcohol and trying to laugh and have a good time, while others were much more subdued and were trying to be respectful about what they were about to witness. Between 1 and 2 a.m., the doors of this unremarkable building opened up, and a group of men dressed in the same dark uniforms came out and didn't say a word to the crowd, and the crowd immediately went silent and began to back away from them. And this group of men, they walked right out in front of this building, and they had lumber and they had tools with them, and they began constructing this kind of strange wooden structure. And so the crowd, they wanted to get up close to see what these guys were doing, but at the same time, they didn't want to get too close. And so as the crowd formed a sort of half moon around these men that were doing the constructing were moving so seamlessly, like all of them had built this structure dozens of times before, and it was
What is happening right now, guys? What?
just muscle memory. And so by about 3 a.m., this structure was built, and they placed this large basket next to the structure. And then these men packed up their tools and the remaining pieces of lumber, and they turned around and they went right back inside the doors into the building and were gone. At this point, the crowd had become quite sizable outside of this building, and they were growing kind of restless because they knew now that this structure was built that the next time those doors open, the show is really going to start. This spectacle they are all there for, it's about to happen. And the crowd all knew that this event couldn't happen if the sun was up, because if the sun was up and the area was well lit, the press would be able to take pictures and film it, and that's not what officials wanted. They wanted this to happen in the darkness.
Okay, I totally missed what year this was. I should go back really. Guessing from the photos, it's like what, late 70s or 80s? See, if this was much older and in England, that I would hazard a guess that are they building a gallows? They've attracted a crowd. There was always a bit of a gory crowd back in those days, executions and such. I am obviously talking about hundreds of years ago, not like last Tuesday.
But for whatever reason, things seemed to be getting delayed inside of this building. And so the crowd was just getting more and more restless. People are getting more and more drunk, and they're getting louder and more disruptive and boisterous. And then around 4:45 a.m., the sun had come up. And so the press was out in full force with their cameras trained at the doors of this building. And so the crowd really at this point is not actually expecting this event to take place, because at this point it just seems totally unlikely. But at 4:50 a.m., those doors swung open, and standing in the threshold was 31-year-old Eugene Weidmann, who was a convicted serial killer. His arms were tied behind his back, and the collar of his white shirt had been tucked down inside because they needed his neck to be free and clear because he was about to be beheaded.
Beheaded? Oh! That hasn't happened around these parts for quite some time. Okay, this is much longer. Further back than, what did I say, the 70s or 80s? Mr. Ballen, tell me just one more time, what year is this? This chap is going to be beheaded. Oh, I thought they did away with beheading much more longer ago than hanging.
So the two guards on either side of Eugene, they pulled him forward out towards the crowd so the executioners behind him, who were dressed all in black, could filter out and take up positions alongside the guillotine, which is that wooden structure that had been built earlier in the morning. And so as Eugene is being brought out towards the crowd and everything is getting set up for his execution, the crowd went wild. They were shrieking and howling and laughing and pointing and booing and just generally being completely rambunctious and totally bloodthirsty.
Not good to hear. I guess that they're similar to an English crowd that would have probably been exactly the same. I really have to know what year this is that's taking place now. Yeah, I'll never understand that mentality of a bloodthirsty mob that are there to witness someone's execution purely for entertainment purposes. But I like macabre things, but that's tasteless. That's too far. It's gross, isn't it?
Eugene kept his head down. He did not want to look at the crowd, and he did not want to look at the guillotine. And so eventually the two guards turned him and walked him directly towards the base of the guillotine, at which point
Yeah, so
the
they were
executioners
building
that
the
had taken up
platform.
their positions around this device, they grabbed him and slid him forward so he was on his stomach on top of this wooden platform, the guillotine, and they slid him forward until his head poked through this opening at the very far end, at which point his neck was positioned right under this huge blade that was dangling right above him, and his head was positioned over a metal bucket on the ground, which he would be looking directly at. At this point, the crowd was at a fever pitch, and one of the executioners pulled a lever. The blade came soaring down, and it removed his head. His head fell into the bin, and the executioners pushed his torso into the basket that had been placed out there earlier, and then the executioners and the prison guards, they gathered up Eugene's body parts and went right back inside of the building, which was a prison. At this point, the crowd was cheering and going wild, and they ran up and began dabbing their scarves and their handkerchiefs in Eugene's blood, which was on the ground, as a sort of souvenir from having been at this execution. And
If this was much further, back in time than I estimated anyway, I've just seen a woman in that photo with a Slipknot hoodie. Maybe they're just using it for illustrative purposes to show a phrased, frenzied mob, bloodthirsty mob. I don't know. Yeah, I always thought the guillotine, I normally call it a guillotine. I always thought they were an awful, gory sight. But to be fair, given the circumstances, I think they're a lot more practical than having an executioner. A lot of those beheadings have been botched throughout history.
of course, because the sun had been out for this entire spectacle, all of this had been captured on film. And so later that day and for the next couple of days, the headlines all over France were about this bloodthirsty crowd that was cheering as this man was beheaded, and it just overall made France look really, really bad. And so French leaders decided that from that point forward, they could no longer do any more public executions. So the guillotine would continue to get used for decades beyond this point, but it was all behind closed doors. Also, random fact about being beheaded by a guillotine: your head, after it's been separated from your body, stays conscious for
Still
about 10 to 12 seconds, so they say. And apparently,
Oh, no. 10 to 12 seconds. I thought it was like, 1 or 2 split seconds, very, very quick seconds, a quick second. So at the time when, if it's, was he a serial killer? When they traditionally pick up the head by the hand, they're like, show it to everybody. If they did it quick enough, you'd still be, oh no, that's horrible.
apparently there's been lots of cases where the executioner, after the condemned has had their head removed, will yell the name of the person who has just had their head removed, and that person's head will look over at the person calling to them and will blink or try to mouth words for several seconds before the lack of oxygen kills the brain and then the head is no longer conscious. Here are some of the more notable pictures that were used in the media from Eugene Weidmann's execution.
I cannot believe I'm trying. I know I've done this a few times already, and I apologize for stopping this video to try and pinpoint what year it is, but this is not that long ago. I genuinely thought, I was going to say the guillotine or public executions had stopped becoming a thing. Ugh. Oh, that's all we get.
In the early
Don't like that
1900s,
fact.
Eben Byers was a man who other people envied. He was born into a very wealthy family in New York City. He attended Yale University in Connecticut, which is a very prestigious Ivy League university,
Yes.
and he was devilishly handsome.
Oh.
After his college graduation, he didn't need a job because his
Devilishly.
family was so rich, and so instead he focused his time on a passion of his, which was golfing. And in time, he became this world-class golfer, going so far as to win the 1906 U.S.
Eben,
Amateur
not
Tournament, which is the biggest amateur golf tournament in the world that most of the winners go on to become professional golfers. And so Eben most likely would have followed that path and become a pro golfer had his father not just handed over the very successful metalworking business that he started that made his family wealthy in the first place. And so Eben stopped his golf career and became the chairman of this incredibly successful company. And so overnight, he basically went from being just rich to being uber rich, making
Ridiculously
more
rich.
money than he could possibly spend. But Eben did attempt to spend his money. He pretty much immediately began buying up luxury properties all over the country. He bought horse racing stables in the United Kingdom and
I mean, that's not
in America,
frivolous.
and he bought an entire luxury box at Forbes Field, which is where the Pittsburgh Pirates professional baseball team used to play.
I don't think those purchases are frivolous or, you know, like squandering your money, wasting your money. They're investments, except for maybe the last one. Maybe the last one was just because it's something he wanted.
And so in addition to owning all these incredible things, Eben also, through his role as chairman of this company, began connecting with and befriending very powerful and influential people, like the
Naturally.
founders and executives at the Coca-Cola Company. And so all in all, Eben's life was really going quite well until 1927. That year, Eben was 47 years old, and he took some time off from gallivanting around the world and rubbing shoulders with famous people to go catch a football game at his alma mater at Yale University. So he hops on a train, he rides to Connecticut, he watches this game, and then afterwards he gets back on the train to head back to Pittsburgh. And this is a very long ride. It's over 12 hours long. And so Eben naturally bought a first-class ticket, and so he was inside of a train car that had bunk beds for passengers to sleep on during the ride. And so Eben climbed into a top bunk and he fell asleep. A few hours later, after the train is well on its way to Pittsburgh, Eben, in his sleep, manages to roll to the side of the bed and actually falls out of his bed onto the ground. He lands hard on his left side, it wakes him up, and as he stands up, he thinks he's okay, but then he feels this shooting pain in his left arm. So he's moving his arm around, he's not really sure what's wrong with it, but he's hoping it's just some bruising, and so he decides to get back into his bunk and just go back to sleep. And so he manages to fall asleep despite the pain, and then when they roll into the station in Pittsburgh several hours later, he wakes up and right away he feels that pain in his left arm. And so after getting off the train and going back to his house and dropping off his luggage, he went right to his physical therapist's office to ask him if there was anything he could do to help with the pain in his arm. And so the physical therapist examines Eben's shoulder and determines that, there's no structural damage to his arm, but obviously Eben is in pain. And so he says, look, there's a new product that came online that's quite expensive, but since you're a man of means, maybe it's something you want to consider.
Just waiting for the name. Morphine. I think morphine's been around for a little bit longer before then, but
It's called Radithor, and it's supposed to dull aches and pains,
I don't know that
and
one.
it's supposed to give you this huge boost of energy. And so,
Radithor.
maybe you want to try that. And so Eben was really excited at the notion of taking this new health tonic and said, yeah, let's do it. And so his physical
I thought he was just going to give him an opioid or something. No, okay, like a health tonic. Okay.
therapist wrote him a prescription for Radithor. Eben took the prescription and he
That's
went to the
Coca-Cola.
drugstore. He picked up a half-ounce bottle of this liquid. He went back to his house and, as prescribed, he drank a very small spoonful of this liquid. And right away, he felt this surge of energy. The pain in his arm started to fade. All the things this health tonic claimed to be able to do.
My money is that this this liquid health tonic is going to be a cocktail of like the most crazy drugs. Come on,
It
let's
was
see.
doing. And so over the next couple of days, Eben very diligently every day took the prescribed amount, a very small spoonful
It looks
of
like
this
that scene of
Radithor,
Mary
and
Poppins.
every day he felt better and better and better. Not just the pain in his arm, but overall he felt happier, he felt fitter, he felt alive, and he was attributing all those feelings to this miracle tonic.
And he carries on, only taking one modest teaspoon a day. Yes.
And so he began taking more and more of this tonic,
No.
well beyond what was prescribed, to the point where he was drinking 3 full bottles of Radithor every single day. And so for years he did this, and it was all going great until his jaw fell off.
No. This is the picture. This is the photo I was telling you about, guys. Of course, you've already seen it at this point. What? The image, which I haven't, I haven't examined in great detail. I've seen like a flash of it with the photo in question. It looks like an attack. It looks like a freak accident. How does one lose their jaw and not, kind of notice signs or, other symptoms long before this happens? You've got major nerves and blood vessels and, oh my gosh, what was he drinking? What was this tonic? I'm thinking, well, it sounds highly addictive, doesn't it? I'm thinking there were, I don't even know. I'm not a drug kind of person. I don't know. I'm guessing there was some kind of opioidness going on there. Amphetamine. I'm talking nonsense now.
Literally, in 1931, one day, his lower jaw just separated from his skull and went slack. And so the reason this happened...
No, because it's held in with, like, obviously your skin here and like your TMJ and... I'm skeptical. I don't believe that can just happen one day. Because of the skin holding it in place. And muscles and
was because Radithor was actually just radioactive water. In the early 1900s, the radioactive element radium was believed to have highly curative properties with no side effects. And so naturally, at the time, dozens of health products were created with radium being their main ingredient. And Radithor was one of those products. It was literally just water and radium. And so after consuming over 1,400 bottles of Radithor over a 3-year period, Eben's body was finally just starting to disintegrate from the inside out. After he had his jaw surgically removed, along with large portions of his upper jaw, the rest of his body also just began to crumble. And so by the end of 1931, when his story was making headlines all around the world about the dangers of Radithor and really more specifically the dangers of radium, Eben had become completely bedridden and his skull was now beginning to disintegrate. There were holes forming all over his skull that were exposing portions of his brain. And so by 1932, Eben was dead. Eben was buried in Pittsburgh, and he was buried inside of a lead-lined coffin that was designed to absorb any of the radiation emitting from his bones. And then 30 years after he was buried, so in 1965, scientists actually exhumed his skeleton to see if it was still emitting radiation. And they determined it was still emitting the same levels of radiation as when he died.
Like a similar thing to Marie Curie. Because they're so radioactive. It's actually dangerous to exhume them. I take back what I said about being cynical, skeptical. That'd do it. How do you not experience like radiation poisoning way before that? Like there'd be signs that surely there'd be symptoms, kind of mild at first, and then they'd get progressively worse. Like, just the vomiting, the fevers, and that's maybe at this point. I don't think I'm really sure what I'm talking about. Maybe it's big doses of radiation in the first instance that cause such extreme radiation sickness. I don't know. How? And if you do have these symptoms, maybe blame the new medicine you've started taking. Oh, that's horrible. Oh, it's so frightening to think that, they had no idea at the time. And then this was a medication that people were prescribed. Like, the idea that something similar can happen these days, you're given medications without there being an awful lot of information. I mean, they're supposed to be, but
And they actually would ultimately figure out that radium, this radioactive element, has a half-life of 1,600 years. So what that means is Eben's body will remain highly radioactive for centuries. Here is a picture of Eben with his jaw surgically removed. It was taken shortly before he passed away.
That's the photo. Oh, poor man. That's never a nice thing to happen to anyone. But Mr. Ballen did also mention that this poor Eben was devilishly handsome. All of that to remedy falling out of bed, shoulder pain. Like, I don't know, could it like a rotary cuff or some kind of injury going on there? Oh no. And it gets worse.
There is still some debate about what exactly happened in this story that I'm about to share with you. And so for transparency, in this video, I am going to rely on the narrative that was presented in court by the defendant. And so with that in mind, here we go. On the afternoon of December 3rd, 2012, a freelance photographer working for the New York Post newspaper named Umar Abbasi was walking down the stairs of the 49th Street subway station in New York City. This very busy station is located only a few blocks away from the very famous Times Square. And so after Umar made his way down to this underground subway station, he walked over to one of the big automated kiosks that looks like an ATM, and he purchased a subway ticket. And then with his ticket, he walked over to the turnstiles. He slid his ticket through the slot, pushed past the turnstiles, and was now standing out on the actual train platform. And from where Umar was standing, this platform basically was like a huge sidewalk that stretched all the way to his right a couple hundred feet and all the way to his left a couple hundred feet.
Don't you love the setting of the scene, creating the ambience that Mr. Ballen does here? Like, he describes everything in such detail. And, I'm a detail-driven person. I like things like that. But it makes you feel like you can literally see the whole story before anything's ever taken place. You've got the backdrop. You've got the setting. Just, shout out to Mr. Ballen there. I appreciate the detail.
And in front of this platform were the actual tracks down below, because the train, when it came out of the tunnel, it would actually come right up alongside this platform with almost no clearance between the platform and the train. As such, the leading edge of the platform, basically the lip of the train platform that's closest to the train tracks, has this big yellow line painted all across it to keep commuters from standing too close to the edge, because if the train came through, they could actually get hit by the train. And so as Umar is standing on this platform and he's looking left and right, it's totally crowded with people, and they're all kind of tucked back against the wall away from this yellow line. And so Umar decides he's going to turn right and wait at the right end of the platform, just because he saw down at the far end there appeared to be a gap in people, and he figured he could stand right there. And so Umar begins navigating past all of these people on the right side of the platform, and for the most part, everyone he is passing either has their head buried in their phone, or they're listening to music, or both. Because the thing about riding trains, especially trains in busy cities, is none of the commuters want to talk to anybody else. They want to be completely left alone. And so as Umar is walking, everyone...
Yeah, I get it. Especially if it's like a daily occurrence as well. It's mundane, it's boring. I don't know. We're all a little bit more, I was going to say introverted. Maybe that's the wrong word. I think I'm introverted. But yeah, no one really wants to even acknowledge something that another person's done. It's like the London Underground. Busy, everyone wants to desperately get from A to B without talking to anyone, without acknowledging the existence of anyone else. It makes you wonder, do crimes happen like down there? Because it's not that people aren't paying attention, it's that, well, I suppose it is, they're just engrossed in what they're doing, because his life.
Was basically doing that,
I
but
don't
at
like
some point he did pass two people that were engaged in a pretty heated conversation.
Oh.
Umar had no idea what they were arguing about, or if they were even arguing at all. He didn't know who these people were,
Stood on their
but he
toes.
took mental note of the fact that two men were kind of bickering with each other. And so he walked past them, didn't give it much of a second thought, and he arrived at a gap in the gaggle of people waiting for the train.
Gaggle.
And there he
That's a
just
good term.
stood well back of the yellow line, where he pulled out his camera and began clicking through the images he had taken earlier in the day at an earlier photo shoot. And so as he's clicking through these pictures, he starts to notice that those two men who had been bickering before are now straight up yelling at each other. They're screaming obscenities at each other. It's not clear who's fighting about what or who is the aggressor, but it's very obvious that at this point they're fighting. And so Umar looked away from his camera and looked left down the platform towards these two guys. And so
normally with everyone else, it'd make them pay even less attention. In the UK anyway, it's like that awkward, like, keep looking, don't make eye contact. Let's shuffle away. Don't get involved.
So these two guys are about 100 to 125 feet away from him, and all the people that were standing in the vicinity of these two men are beginning to migrate away from them. They just don't want anything to do with them, because the thing about being in subways, especially in cities like New York, is there's lots of people that go down into these train stations that are inebriated or mentally unstable, and so very strange and bad behavior is just kind of a normal thing, and people tend to just kind of ignore it. And so that's what's happening. People are kind of walking away from these two fighting men, doing their best to pretend it's not happening. And so Umar spent a couple more seconds staring down the platform at these two men, but eventually just shrugged and thought, you know what, whatever problems they have, they're not mine.
Well, the problem is the longer you make eye contact and you stare, if they're angry, the argument's going to die down slightly maybe, or one of them's going to look over in that direction and go, and what are you looking at? That's why you don't. That's why I think everyone just doesn't make eye contact and just looks away.
So Umar went back to his camera and continued to click through his pictures when all of a sudden he hears a scream coming from the left side of the platform. But it was not a scream that sounded like it came from either of these two men. And so Umar looked up from his camera and looked left down the platform, and now he just sees chaos. It's people running away from these two men. People are running to get away from whatever is happening around them. And so Umar's thinking these men must have come to blows, and they're now fighting actively, physically with each other. But when finally the crowd kind of cleared for a second, he saw a woman pointing down at the train tracks right in front of where those two men had been standing. And so Umar looks at the woman and he follows her finger down onto the tracks, and he sees there is now a man, one of the two men who had been fighting, laying face down on the train tracks. And then, to Umar's horror, he looks up down the tunnel where the train would come out of, and he sees the headlights of the train. It is now coming into the station. And so Umar starts running down the platform to try to get to this man to pull him out of the tracks. And as he's running, he pulls out his camera and he turns the flash on and he holds the shutter down and he aims it at the train conductor to hope the flashing of his camera will alert the train conductor to put on the emergency brake and stop the train before he hits this guy down on the tracks. And so as Umar is running, trying to signal this train conductor, the man down on the tracks tries to stand up, and Umar sees he's really struggling to stand, and when he finally gets up, he turns and he grabs the edge of the platform and he tries to pull himself up and out of the tracks, but he doesn't have the strength or the coordination. And as Umar is getting closer and closer, but he's still too far away to help, he sees that this guy down on the tracks is not going to be able to get out of there before the train hits him. And so Umar finally comes to a stop and he watches as this man down on the tracks lets go of the lip of this platform and just turns and faces the train like he knows what's about to happen. And then seconds later, the train, although it did try to stop, impacted this man and killed him instantly.
Why is no one, trying to hoist him up, desperately trying? It's probably a lot easier said than done, but try.
The man's name was Kaisa Khan, and he was 58 years old. When the police finally showed up, they arrested the other man who Han had been fighting with. He was a 30-year-old named Naeem Davis, and Davis would actually tell police that he had been fighting with Han and he had pushed him onto the tracks, but it was in self-defense. However, that self-defense story didn't stop him from being charged with murder. While Davis sat in jail waiting for his trial, the media and the public at large had already come to the conclusion that Davis was guilty. And this was due in large part to a particular picture. As Umar was running down the platform, holding up his camera, holding the flash down, trying to flag the train conductor to get him to stop, Umar was also taking dozens and dozens of pictures. And those pictures were of Han right before he was struck by the train. And so after Umar ultimately discovered he had taken these pictures, he gave them to his employer, the New York Post newspaper.
But this is after he's been pushed in the in I don't know what you'd call it, in a line of the train. So what could that possibly prove?
And the day after the incident, they ran on the front page a picture of Han right before he's about to be killed with the headline, "Doomed." And so once the public saw this picture, nobody could believe that Davis was anything other than a cold-blooded killer for pushing this poor innocent man onto the tracks.
But it still doesn't prove or disprove that he acted in self-defense. Because the photos have only been taken after he's been pushed into the line of the train. So why does this other chap's story not hold up?
But as it would turn out, nearly 5 years later, when Davis did finally get his trial, he was acquitted of all charges because it turned out Han was very drunk and had picked a fight with Davis, and Davis was filmed on more than one occasion on the platform trying to get Han to leave him alone. And so finally, after Han began making death threats and then grabbed Davis's shoulder, Davis turned around and pushed him, and Han, being drunk, stumbled and fell backwards onto the tracks and then was ultimately killed. Here is the infamous photo of Han on the cover of the New York Post newspaper.
Oh, that's hard. That's hard to look at, isn't it? Why did it take 5 years? So he was he in prison for those 5 years until he got his trial and then was acquitted. That's not fair. I mean, that's a massive understatement, but you know.
So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments section what it is and where you found it. So give us the timestamp. And if you're the first to do that, we'll pin you at the top of the comments section. If you got something out of today's episode and you haven't done this already, please become a surgeon and get a job at the hospital located nearest to where the like button lives. And then eventually, when the like button goes in for a very minor outpatient surgery, accidentally give them a craniectomy. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly 2 or 3 video uploads. We are now selling merchandise like flannels and hats and sweatshirts and mugs and all sorts of stuff. If you're interested in official Mr. Ballen merch, go to shopmrballen.com. If you want to know about upcoming deals and promotions, check out our shop's Instagram page. The username is shopmrballen. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram or on Twitter. My username for both platforms is the same. It's John Ballen 416. I also have a ton of content over on TikTok where my username is Mr. Ballen. We also have a second YouTube channel called Mr. Ballen Shorts, where we post random short videos and lost episodes. We also have a Facebook page just called Mr. Ballen, where we post very condensed versions of the stories we post on YouTube. If you have a story suggestion, please submit it to our subreddit just called Mr. Ballen. It's linked in the description below. So whether I see you on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, Facebook, or some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support. And until next time, that's going to do it. See ya.
See ya. I have a suggestion. I have a story suggestion, although I don't know if it's like classic Mr. Ballen. I would love to see like a folklore related mini-series from different places, like different countries. Obviously, I'm going to say there's lots of different folklore across the UK, so I think that should make an episode, and then do one on like folklore from the US. And yeah, I just think that'd be really cool. Maybe it's just me. You know, when he mentions the clues in the videos, maybe it's because I'm so engrossed in the story. Whatever it is, I don't notice the damn thing. Does anyone else? I'm so oblivious. Right, guys. That second story in particular, really, really creeped me out. Oh, you can't believe that could happen to anyone. Well, guys, I hope you found that half as interesting as I did. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.